How's it going, everyone? So, before we dive into the episode, I really want to say thank you to everyone that is listening in, that's tuning in, that's enjoying this content and getting value from it. I really love that. That's why I do it. But there's a huge amount of you that are listening that are not subscribed, not following the podcast. And I really want to encourage you to please follow and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening or viewing this on. It really helps out the podcast. It helps out the algorithm. It helps more people hear this content that you already find helpful and that they hopefully will as well. So if you go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast on any platform that you're listening on, and please share it with your friends, that'll be great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's get into the episode.
How's it going, Richard? It's great to finally get you on the podcast here. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Joe, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Great. I love the podcast. Big fan. And I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always refreshing to hear that people actually listen to the podcast and that they actually enjoy it.
It's not all for nothing, Joe. Your work has not been in vain. People actually do listen. I certainly do. No, I am a big fan. I'm not overselling it. I think it's really pragmatic, and I find it's hard for me, my age, in cybersecurity, to find something pragmatic that's not trying to sell you a gadget or widgets. It's not so, and it seems to be very, very pragmatic advice I find on your podcast. Well done.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. It's been an interesting journey, and I feel like this year, I don't know what it is. I feel like every year is a different, I guess like growing opportunity or growing season, if that makes any sense at all. Like this year I haven't looked at my numbers at all, but like last year I obsessed over my numbers.
Yeah.
And this year I'm just focused on like having good conversations, having people on that I want to talk to. And I feel like that's made the podcast a little bit better in some ways.
I think you're right, Joe. I think, the more you tend to look after it, the more you have fun, the more it perpetuates itself, and one answers the other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Richard, why don't we start with how you got into security, how you got into IT? Take me back to when that was, and what was that decision like?
If you have video, you can see I'm a really old guy. And I'm getting to be one of those old guys I didn't want to be. When you were growing up, you also always had that neighbor who, you kick the ball onto his lawn and you were afraid to ask for it back. That's the guy I'm starting to be. I've been 30 years in what is now called the cybersecurity industry. It was once upon a time computer industry, which was an extension from information security, realm when we started to process sensitive information on computers. I was there. I saw it all happen. I was there. I was at that meeting. We had good biscuits, but we did a lot of things I wished in hindsight we could have done differently. But been in the industry for 30 years. I started my career. I'm an American. I'm currently working in London, and I'm running a company called Risk Crew, and we are a product agnostic, fundamentals consultancy. We're small, about 35 people, and we preach the gospel according to its process, not the product. It's the configuration of the firewall, the maintenance, the management, the patching. It's not the firewall itself. Anyway, so we, when we do things like GRC, fundamentals, compliance to ISO or SOC 2, and out here it's NIST 2 and DORA now, through the risk assessments and supply chain, risk management strategies, and all the way through to pen testing and sexy thing like red team testing. So I've been doing it for business is running for about 20 years, but once upon a time, I started in Washington, D.C., worked for on government projects, and I got headhunted by Lucent and Philips. They did a joint venture way back when on cell phones and brought me over and took me to Paris and did that for a couple of years until I thought I really wanted to start something by myself. So started the business in London, and that's it. We opened up the doors doing things like application pen testing because we saw the game on an application level. We were early founders of OWASP, and anything open source, we put our arms around it and say, if that's what you can afford, and that's, you don't have to buy something, buy a product. So Anyway, I've had a long, but at the end of the day, Joe, I'm a big picture song and dance guy. I'm a risk guy. I could rebuild my old laptop if I had to, but that's a big, if I had to is pulling a lot of weight in that sense, as they say. Yes, I would know a firewall if you hit me over the head with it, but you'd probably have to hit me 2 or 3 times. I'm a big picture. What are you trying to protect? Why are you trying to protect it? What's going to happen to you if you fail? What's your appetite for risk? And one of these guys who I've always thought that cybersecurity is an oxymoron, no such thing as a secure computer. It's identify, minimize, manage. So spent a career doing that. It's really helping clients do strategy with cybersecurity strategy, and then filling out that strategy with controls and people, process, technology. It's been a long road. I'd like to say it's been fun. It hasn't been as fun as I thought it was going to be in hindsight. Yeah, out here in Europe, we have a really good view as a consultancy that's not selling a thing. We have a really good view of the threat landscape. I really do feel that in the position I'm in my industry, I've got my finger, or at least we have a clear view of how threat actors are getting in, and strong controls that you could do to negate that. So yeah, a bit fun. Still is fun. It changes every day I come to work, which is a good thing.
Well, tell me about being an American and moving to Europe.
Yeah.
I actually love Europe. Unfortunately, I've mostly spent, I think, pretty much all of my time in Germany, right? I've been to Ireland for 48 hours, right? I feel like I did the whole island in 48 hours. I went to Amsterdam, but I don't know if that really counts as spending time in the Netherlands, right?
No, it counts. You get that's a check in your passport. It counts. In some places, it counts for twice the amount of time you actually spent there, because you could have lost time there.
Yeah, for sure. As someone that loves Germany, right? I'm trying to convince the wife that when we retire in like 30 years, right? Hey, let's go over to Germany. Like, let's go to Europe. Let's go travel over there. And she's very against it, but she's also never been, right? So what's that like? Because, and I ask also because in America, it isn't very often that we get Europeans, right? But I remember the last time I was over in Germany, I went into a random cigar shop in Munich, and one of the people in the lounge, there was 3 people in the lounge, right, including myself. One of them was an American, born in Seattle, founded a company, sold it to Microsoft, moved to Germany, and founded another company. He's getting ready to sell it again, right? So, like, I'll run into Americans in Europe, like, all the time, it seems. But very rarely do I get any run-ins with anyone from Europe in America.
I didn't have that experience. The bulk of my professional life in the States. Well, I was born in the Midwest, but I ended up going to school in Washington, D.C., which was very international. Georgetown American University, very, very international. In fact, I studied international affairs. And so I've heard, you can walk down the streets of Washington and hear French and Portuguese and German spoken on the street. But I like to travel. And of course, Washington is a very international city because of all the embassies and the government seat. And I used to travel. I used to travel a lot. I loved it. But the first chance I got, I wanted to get out. I was in the military, and I lived outside of the U.S. for quite some time. And I think there are benefits that are not known until you actually receive them. And for me, being an American in Washington, D.C., inside that little D.C. bubble of politics and, reading the Times in the morning and the Post at night, and I was one of these geeks who would actually listen to McNeil Lair on the weekends. I was just information obsessed, and yet felt like I knew nothing politically. Anyway, the point of that story is then I had the chance to go overseas, and I initially went to Paris. I live in France now. I have a business in London. My wife is French, and my wife, who's French, frankly, doesn't think very highly of Americans. You know what? I can't say I blame her, outside of the obvious reason. But in Europe, I find there's a finer appreciation to a certain rhythm of life, the benefits of family, friends, food. I remember when I first moved to Paris, as an American, I'd get there and I'd say, okay, let's eat, let's go do something. It was like, why do you want to do something? Let's go bowling. Let's see a movie. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And for an American, it was about the quantity of how many things you could pack in a night. And the French was very, hey, just sit down and have dinner. I had to get used to sitting down for dinner and getting up at 8 o'clock in the evening and getting up at midnight. But once you do, Joe, you don't want to, it is meaning that the evening is for family and food, and you sat down and ate, and that's it. And I had to be reprogrammed as an American to live in a European culture. I live in France in a small village. I got to tell you, the quality of life, like I said, the pace, the rhythm of life is a lot more real. Like from the fruits and the vegetables to how time passes. It just, and as an American, that's not it. Americans I was raised in the culture of, it's quantity, not quality. And in Europe, I find the Europeans have a finer taste for quality over quantity. And I know that's a cliche, but it's certainly one for my age and experience that is based on a certain truth. So I enjoy life in Europe. It's not, I tell you, the hardest part for me as an American was starting a business, because I started it in the UK, which is supposed to be, it's the same culture divided by a common language, as they say. But, very, very different from how Americans do business. For example, the English, I find, just don't like to tell you no. And, as I'm moving in cybersecurity, I'm like, can we help you out with pen testing? Can we do this? Can we do that? Yeah, maybe. Don't want to say no. And it's, where in the States is, hey, you interested in getting some pen testing? No, no thanks. Okay, thanks. Don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste mine. But there's a certain politeness that's in a European business environment that I find as an American. It's just like, whoa, that was new. Sorry, it's been 3 years. I've been asking you if you've been interested in supply chain risk assessments, and I think you would have, and you have to come to a sense to say, all right, I'm a nuisance. So anyway, there's a lot of things that, after I've been over here 30 years, and after 30 years, I'm looking around thinking, I still feel like an outsider here.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the culture differences, between Europe just overall and America, right? When I went to that cigar lounge, because I had spent a decent amount of time in Germany before then. I think I spent probably 8 weeks total in Germany before that, which is a good amount, right, for an American to make that kind of a journey to go there, several times and whatnot. When I went to the cigar lounge, it was closer to like closing time, right? Or what it was they were closing early, but it wasn't posted online. So I thought that I was there, 2-3 hours before closing. In all actuality, I had about 45 minutes, right? I didn't know. So I bought the cigars, and I asked very politely, can I smoke them in your lounge? Because I don't know, some lounges are different, right? They have different rules in America. You have to spend a certain amount. Maybe the lounge is only for members, all that sort of thing. He goes, well, where else were you going to smoke it? I'm like, well, I mean, I guess, he goes, he's like, Joe, it's 30 degrees outside. I'm not going to tell you to go outside and smoke a cigar. I'm like, well, that was kind of my plan. And, the hospitality was something totally different. If that was in America, they'd be like, no, we're closing,
Yeah, there's that. There's this. That's I guess what I mean in terms of the pace of life, the rhythm of life. We're not going to close the doors on you. When you just bought the cigar, we understand, and it's always in there. That's a good example. It's a really good example of the way businesses operate differently. And there's more focus on people. But I tell you, on the flip side of that, though, Joe, in terms of things like how people bring this closer home in terms of cybersecurity, I find the Europeans in general have a very fine appreciation of privacy in general. You would have, in the States, you would have bought some cigars, and within minutes, you would have been in databases across the States about, cigar smokers, how are you left-handed? Are you right-handed? Do you like these cigars? Do you like those cigars? And in that same, in Germany, you walk into a place, you get a cigar, and, the fact that you like cigars is not going to be shared as a consumer with anybody else. It's just this data privacy is a big deal. And as an American, I love that because, it's cybersecurity. I love that. I talk to U.S. businesses who have data is just a commodity. It's cash. Where over here, data is not, protecting data is not about ones and zeros. It's about, this is data about people's lives, whether it's the kind of cigars they like or where their geolocation, where they were last week, or what kind of movies they like, or Netflix to-do list. It's a very more private as well as personal approach to both business and what I'm finding is security. People see data as a human thing, and the right to privacy and these things that you see in GDPR, the right to be forgotten, the right to this, the right to that. It is seen as a fundamental human right that the data that businesses process, store, and transmit on us, on their customers, isn't just given out willy nilly like it is in the States, frankly. So that's what I see, and I appreciate both, this pace, this rhythm of life, and also this focus on the fundamentals of privacy. I think the Europeans got that absolutely right. We could learn a lot. As Americans, we could learn a lot because we just don't understand, and what we have until it's gone.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and being in security, right? I remember when GDPR was coming out, and everyone in America was, stressed out about it. It was on the news, and especially everyone in security, because we were paranoid that something would leave the boundaries and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
But I felt like I was the outlier, right? I was the one that was saying, man, this is actually really great. I wish that we had something like that here, because it gives the power of that data, of holding that data back to the person that created that data, right? And that is something that is so foreign in America, and probably 99% of people in America don't even realize that. You're on Facebook and it's free because you're the product, right? Cambridge Analytica set up an API with Facebook for a very, very small amount, like $15 or whatever it was. And they were able to harvest all of your data. And guess what? They use that to sell to other companies to use direct marketing against you. So it's it's a dirty business almost.
Well, okay, so yeah, that you're making exactly, it for me, you're just ringing a bell that I wish more Americans would. I live and work in Europe where there is a finer appreciation to, personal data is just that, it's personal. This is my dental records, this is my blood type, this is my DNA, and as such, I have a right to it. I remember 20 years ago when the EU was first coming together that they were talking about, literally data should have like a copyright to it. Like a songwriter gets a royalty for a song that he writes.
Hmm.
So should a data subject get a royalty every time a business uses that data to make money. Hey, you're using my blood type, you're using my DNA to generate a revenue for your business. How come I'm not getting a piece of that? That logically holds up to me as a consumer. I'm thinking, and of course, the impact on our lives from our data being sucked up into this big vacuum cleaner of Amazon or Facebook or whoever, and it's resold and repackaged and, or Analytica. You don't know until it's over, and you've either lost a political party by that, or, and you understand what the impact really was on the society or as you as an end user. And it's, when it's over, it's over. You can't get back privacy. It's a binary condition. Once your DNA is out there, it's out there, and that's it. And I know so many people who've been in that. So many people who, oh sure, I'll join up to Ancestry.com. Here's a DNA swab, and then suddenly they can't get health insurance, and their kids can't get health insurance, and you're like, of course, don't you understand? That's the way it works. That data is sold to people who want to buy and understand who's prone to emphysema or bronchitis or leukemia or but data privacy is just anyway. I get the Europeans. I tell you, it is one of the pleasures of living and working here. That there's a finer sensitivity to actually, once we lose this data, and so it gives it more of an importance. I find American firms, even those American firms who are here working in Europe, they just see it as ones and zeros, where Europeans see it as this is data about my life, and it deserves. I deserve for it to be processed, stored, and transmitted, securely. And that doesn't mean it always is. That's far from it. But there's that approach to it, which I appreciate much more as a cybersecurity risk management quote unquote professional.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that Europe has seen more revolutions, right, kind of plays a role into it, right? I mean, no one in America even thinks of the revolution that we had, right? That was 300, 400 years ago, right? Like who cares about that? No one knows about it anymore. If the government were to tell us, one thing about it, like we wouldn't be able to refute it really because, you're in grade school when you learn it, fifth grade. I don't think I remember anything about it other than it happened, in whatever year, right? 1776, right? That's it. That's the extent. And it's so foreign to us to say that's not right. We have to go change it. Like we don't even know how to go change it. I was talking to a friend over in the UK, and he was saying, I'm very confused as to how America hasn't had a revolution yet. You guys have all the guns. How do you not have a
Amen.
revolution? Like, how do you not have the government that you want? And I was like, hey man, we don't know how to do a revolution anymore. We know how to protest. We know how to, have some riots, but we don't know how to take it beyond that, you know? And we have no ability to because we haven't done it in 400 years almost. And we see other countries doing it, but somehow we still kind of have it in the back of our minds. Hey, you can't do that. That's not for you, right?
Yeah, it's odd because the American personality, at least to Europeans, is that we're very aggressive and we are nuts about our guns, nuts about our freedom. But
Yeah.
we don't put two and two together, and it doesn't. You're right. I love that. We don't get the government we deserve or that we want. But I don't know. I don't think it's as easy as that. I think there's just a leadership void. Yeah, and frankly, we're a big country full of we're all immigrants. We've all come from somewhere else. We all went there to have build a better life. And Europeans get that. They see the Americans, because, and they have, their aunts, their uncles, whether they're, from Germany, from Poland, from France, from Spain, they know somebody in the States because they have relatives there who've immigrated there 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. My
Hmm.
grandparents came from Poland, and it was the place to be. And so you went there to get away from what was happening in Poland at the time, or what was happening everywhere. We one respect, we don't know how good we have it. Where the Europeans have a long, as you say, a long bloody history of turmoil and social unrest, and they know what it takes to when you got to go out on the street. French just had an election. The UK, the Brits just had an election. It is just we're a two-party system in the United States. We're a two-party system. It's this one or it's this one. It's the right hand or the left hand. Which do you want? And in a country as big as 340 million people, whatever we are now, how can it come down to two choices? I don't know. It's just amazing. And because of that, we don't get leadership. Back to, i.e., like data protection, privacy legislation. A country like the United States does not have federal regulation to mandate data protection. That's crazy. That's crazy to a European.
Yeah.
We talk about Europeans see it as a fundamental human right, and Americans don't even have it registered as a law. Unless you live in California and you got California State Senate Bill, 1926, whatever it is, yeah, and there are states that are far more. But how in the world can Americans not have, legislation mandating privacy data that we in the cybersecurity industry are bound to protect? So hey, okay, it's just you get what you deserve. The political leaders, I think, that you deserve, and as a common denominator culture, the Americans, I see it living overseas. We elect common denominator leaders who speak, in sound bites and try to please as many people as possible. And year after year, we get less and less done. I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
not being pessimistic. I'm technically a baby boomer. I'm on the end of a baby boomer. I was born in the late 50s, and I don't know. It was a different time growing up in the 60s for a kid like me, when people are trying to live at the Pentagon and stop the war in Vietnam, and suddenly we're overtaking the capital. I don't get my tribe. I don't understand what happened to us. How do we go from baby boomers trying to levitate the Pentagon, to overtaking the House and Senate? I don't know. It's I don't. But the other thing though, Joe, is we're young. And that's absolutely what Europeans know. As you said, they've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of history. I lived in Paris. I lived in an apartment building. It was older than my country. It was older than the United States. The
Wow.
apartment had been around for 500 years. And I thought, oh, okay, that gives me perspective, and I'm just living here, and my country hasn't even, had separated from England for that. So it's young, it's early days. I'm hoping that we get through turmoil and start to understand what we really want, because, man, we're capable of so much.
Man, that is so wild that your apartment building was older than America, especially considering, it went through two world wars. That is wild to think that, and I think that that's part of the appeal to Europe for me, is the history behind it, right? Like it's just it's amazing. Like everywhere you turn and the way that they present the history and the way that they teach it's something that's unlike, anything that I've experienced in America, which is, I think, kind of what draws me there. But, to your point about data privacy, that's a really good point. America doesn't have, one overarching body that governs data privacy, right? Or one overarching law, so to speak, right? We have a whole bunch of different, little individual laws that are different by state that, and for people that are listening potentially, in Europe, right? One of our states is the size of your country. Like that's literally what it is. And, it's funny. First time I went to Germany, I was talking to someone from Russia, and he was confused as to how I hadn't seen, thoroughly traveled, and been to every single state in America. He goes, I can understand Hawaii because that's so far away, but how can you live on the same continent and not go to everything? And someone else from the UK that actually, studied American history was like, hey man, the state of Illinois is like 2 times the size of Germany, right? And he was so confused. He was so blown away by that fact. And I literally told him, I was like, hey, you could drive for 8 hours and you're still in Illinois, or you're just about to break that border, right? Like that's how crazy, just how crazy the
I've
distance
driven
is,
that highway. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
no,
if you start at
it's
the top and you go to the bottom, it's like 8.5 hours. It's insane.
no. I remember I used to drive from Washington D.C. to Wisconsin, and it was just to get across Ohio felt like a major commitment. You felt like and I've never understood like the trucking industry, how you could drive like that for a living. Yeah, yeah. The size, the space is just overwhelming. But on the other hand, when you talk about international travel and stuff, so yes, we're living in states that are the size of countries in Europe and elsewhere around the world. But at the end of the day, the other thing is that Americans. I see this statistic, and it's like 7 out of 10 Americans don't even have a passport. So we
Yeah,
might go to Canada, we might drive down to Tijuana, or go to Cancun for that's our idea of international travel. But honestly, to go to another country and then look back and look at the United States, you see it in a completely different context. Yes, you see how big it is, and yes, you see how varied and how tough the problems are, but it's not until you leave someplace that you really understand it. I think is what we're talking about, and you either do or you don't. You could take a cruise, go to the Bahamas, and come back and say, I traveled internationally, or you could go to Cambodia now and look at it historically and figure, and in context of the Vietnam War, and look at it now and think, wow, this is just the world is around us.
yeah,
We have no clue. We have no
yeah.
clue.
That's
We
so
have no clue.
absurd that 7 out of 10 Americans don't have their passport.
It's a rough statistic. I heard this years ago, and every year I just hear it's like the same. It's like
Yeah,
it's like those FBI cybersecurity statistics. They're different, but they're the same year after year after year. And the fact is, and you know what? Hey, okay, that's if you're happy and you don't feel the need to travel, that's fine. But I think that's our perspective. It's good right here. And I know growing up, with Polish grandparents who really sacrificed everything they could to get to the United States, to get a job making beer in Milwaukee, that was the end goal. Why do I want to go back to Poland, or much less, France or Italy or Spain. It's no, I wanted to be here. And there was that mentality when I was growing up. You don't need everything you need is right here in the United States. And to a certain extent, it was. It maybe still is, But yeah, we don't had it been not been National Geographic. My dad had a fix for National Geographics. That was my little fix. And you read those and just something gets in your blood. You gotta go to Africa. You gotta go to you gotta see China. And once you do, you think, oh, what was I whining about back in the States?
Yeah.
We don't know how good we have it. But we're off to work.
Yeah, that's a really good point though that you bring up. And do you think that the sheer size of America kind of plays into the data privacy law issue in America? The reason why I say that is because it seems like in America there's like very definitive that we have as a nation that the federal government leaves up to the states, right? I think more because they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to spend the time and resources to actually, solve it, right? And so they leave it up to the states to decide on how they're going to, treat something or act with something, right? Do you think that the size plays a role, or is it just, lazy Americans not wanting to kind of go all the way with something?
I don't know. Look at how look at I think of when I was a kid, I was driving around in cars with no seatbelts. They weren't mandatory. They weren't mandatory. And we were getting in car crashes and flying through the windshield at 20 miles an hour. We were. And people were needlessly dying because Detroit did not see any financial motivation in putting, I don't know, how much does a seatbelt cost? A piece of canvas with a metal buckle on,
Can't be much.
$2-3 if you bought them at mass. Yeah, exactly. But it took guys like Ralph Nader in my lifetime to just say, this has got to stop, right? And, so in certain areas, airline regulation, automobile safety, suddenly we get from no seatbelts to, anti-lock brakes and airbags and, and look at all the features that now, and that's mandated, by federal legislation and overseen by safety council. What's the problem? What's the difference between that and cybersecurity? I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's just it can hurt a consumer. It's proven. Your data's lost and it can have a financial impact on you. Whether it's immediately in this identity theft or long term, like I can't get health insurance, whatever it is. But clearly the connection between the citizen in a society and the protection of that citizen's data. That, there are data sets. I'm not talking about name and date of birth, but I am talking about DNA and I am talking about blood type and health records and things that are sensitive to that end user. I don't understand how we don't see that as a government requirement to protect citizens. We protect our citizens when we put them behind the wheels of cars, but we don't protect them when we allow them to use the internet and have Jeff Bezos take their geolocation and sell that for, and their religious affiliation or their sexual preference or are they gay, are they bi, are they this, are they that, and sell that, monetize that. I don't get it. I don't get it. So I think it's not because we're a big country or because people who live in South Dakota differ from people who live in North Dakota or California or Chicago or, Illinois. I think it's because we have not looked at it from a macro level and understood the damage this is doing to our society, to our people, like safety in automobiles or safety in in airplanes. We need safety in our computers. And it's funny because when it comes to understanding cyber threats, from nation states, this administration alone, unbelievable, making sure that when the government is processing, storing or transmitting government information that we keep out of harm's way. But why aren't we doing that for our citizens? Yeah, no idea. No idea. I don't understand how we don't have a Ralph Nader for cybersecurity that says enough is enough.
Yeah.
We're losing too much data.
Yeah, it's a good point. I only come back to, like what's been going on with Facebook, right, or Meta, where Meta was caught, what was it? It was like promoting, sex trafficking in some way and allowing, pedophiles to connect with children and things like that, right? And they kind of got a slap on the wrist, right? They got brought before Congress And now we are 3-4 months removed from that. We're in an election year, and no one is thinking about that, right? Anyone listening to this podcast, I almost guarantee you haven't thought about that since then,
Yep.
right?
Right.
Until right now. And what was the most that Congress did? I mean, I don't even think that they fined them, right? But when the data is so abundant and you have so much of it and you're making money off of that data, what is a fine going to do, right? Because Meta probably has lobbyists working for them that's going to go get that fine down, so it's not going to be the real like total amount or anything like that, right? But when you're basically printing money, as these big data companies, what's a fine going to do? I feel like there's too much money going around for any real impact to take place in the data privacy, right? Because the companies that have this data that are making, insane amounts of money off of this data, they have the money to go and pay for the lobbyists to go and say, hey, you're invested in my company too, congressperson, senate person, whatever, right? You're invested in my company too. You have a vested stake in this. How about you just leave it alone? And 9 times out of 10, they'll either leave it alone or they'll make a change that isn't really significant to the business to improve anyone else's data privacy.
Joey, you're bringing me
Yeah.
down. I thought we were going to be positive. Thought I was going to hang up feeling, hey, uplifted. You're right. For me, I'm listening to two things. I'm thinking all the money they could make, they could put a little more effort into protecting that data. And the other key word that you use is they were caught. Now, when you're caught for one thing, think of all the things you weren't caught for. So getting caught, profitizing off of, a sex trade, that is one thing. Well, that just shows you that if that's where you're caught, I think it's like, for me, I absolutely do believe, criminals, you always see the tip of the iceberg. You see when you're getting caught, you're just stupid. And it's where you're not getting caught that people are getting away with real crime and making real money. It is I don't know, Joe. I don't have an answer. I think we need a consumer. I'm not kidding when I said we need a Ralph Nader for privacy. We need somebody to say enough is enough. How is it? That Facebook and Meta and Amazon and all these tech companies have shown us that data equals cash. And once we understood that our data, our personal data, meant their cash, how come we didn't say, stop? You have no right to sell my DNA. You have no right to sell my biometrics, my blood type, my religious affiliation, my tax code, my social security number. These things are mine. This is my intellectual property. They belong to me. I don't know, but yet we're just. I just think we're dumb. I can't. I never forget my sister once. She's working on a family tree, and she showed me this family tree. I said, "Where'd you get this?" And it says, here, Uncle so and so came over from Krakow in 1906, and I'm like, I don't even think Grandma knew that. How does this company, located in Illinois, how do they know more about my family than my family does? Please tell me that. We never even knew who Aunt so and so was married to, or what her real maiden name was, or and yet this is in a database that people are selling to us. Here's your family. Let me sell that back to you. Here's your family tree. And these ancestry, platforms, you think, and now they get into DNA. I just don't understand how we didn't catch up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's my family. How come I got to pay for that information? Hey, give us a free this, and hey, give us a free DNA swab, and we'll show you who you could be connected to. And you're like, wait a minute, I found out my niece gave away her DNA, and I'm saying, hey, that's my DNA too. That wasn't your right to give up our family DNA. I don't know. We just don't get it. We don't. It's this, and of course we're lazy, we're fat, we're overfed, underloved, and we just love the convenience. The convenience of Bezos telling us the next book we're going to buy, or Netflix telling us, hey, if you like this, watch this, this, and this, and not understanding, well, where do they get that data? And we just don't get it. So anyway, I think it's a consumer thing, and I think until consumers say enough is enough, and then we ask for, I'm not pro legislation or regulation, but I don't see how this is going to be fixed. We couldn't put seatbelts in cars without legislation, without the government mandating it. And then it changed lives. It saved lives. millions and millions of us have been saved from drunk driving, and and the same thing could happen in our industry, in our cybersecurity industry. But I don't know. When I tell I'm at a conference and I'm advocating regulation, I sound like some neo fanatical. The government's not the answer. When the government has to step in, we all got it wrong. Clearly, we need to fix something that's broken. And the fact that our personal data is monetized by other companies with no kickback to me, I think something's wrong. And the fact that they don't pay to protect that data, and breach it, then suddenly bad guys have it as well as Meta, and because Meta lost its database of everybody who's left-handed in Wisconsin, and they have that database of everybody who's left-handed in Wisconsin. They do, and because if you can monetize left-handers in Wisconsin, you can sell it. I'm telling you, that's the whole point. Until we see that, and then suddenly, hey, the left-handed database is up for sale on the dark web. People don't care. Okay, I'm left-handed, but it doesn't mean I won't have job opportunities in my future. Really? Well, see when the right-handed people take control. How you feel about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how many sports organizations would actually buy a database like that. That's left-handed people that play a certain sport. Because predominantly the players are right-handed, right? So if you can go with your left hand, it throws everything off. It really confuses a right-handed player sometimes of the timing and everything, right? I'm thinking about baseball. But to bring it back to risk, you brought up an interesting point with Facebook, right? Or Meta, they were caught with, an atrocious crime, right? Sex trafficking, right? And they were not committing the sex trafficking themselves, but they were definitely enabling it and allowing it to happen on their platform, right? They were profiting from it. And someone, at Meta, right, a lawyer or someone else, right, literally said, what's the risk of us getting caught with this compared to this other thing? And, someone had to say, oh, I'd rather be caught with sex trafficking. I mean, that is
that we can bounce back from. Yeah.
That's the risk calculation that they made. That's the actual math right there, right?
Yep.
And they probably attributed how much they would be fined, the publicity that they would lose or gain, all of that stuff, right? And so it's fascinating to think about it that way, because I'll give you an example, right? I was at a friend's wedding, and me and probably like 5 other couples are, having their first kid within the next 6 months, right? It's a huge thing. And, these couples are saying, I'm not going to go with a baby monitor or like a normal, camera baby monitor because, the camera feed is being sold on the dark web, and, predators are breaking into homes and stealing babies and things like that. The 0.001% of, these occurrences, that's what they're basing their risk profile off of. And, they're asking me what I'm going to do, right? Because I'm in cybersecurity, and what am I going to do? And, I told them, like, yeah, I'm getting a Nader, baby monitor or whatever. It's going to be great. And they were just completely confused. How are you going to do that, right? And I'm saying, look, you are a small fish in a very large pond. One, what are the odds that someone is going to find that specific data feed? And two, I actually have network security controls in place where I can limit very precisely how much data that camera sends externally, which I actually had to really lock down significantly, because Nader is just a spy tool. At this point, Nader is just a spy tool for how much data it was actually sending out of my network. I have a medium-sized enterprise network in my home. Okay, like I have network switches, I have firewalls, everything like that, right? And the amount of data that it was actually sending outside of my network was crashing my network. It was slowing everything down to a halt, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? I did not just pay a premium to Xfinity to get 100 down. Like, I paid the premium for 1.5 gigs down, And I look, and it's Nader. Nader's taking up 90% of my network bandwidth, and I could not believe it. I mean, obviously I put the restrictions so that it's literally just allowing me to, connect from my app. Like as a parent, that's very concerning. It's alarming, right? Because I mean, it's a camera that you're using to watch your kid when they sleep, right? And make sure that they're okay. That's it, right? But they're sending so much data. I mean, they have to be collecting data from every other device on the network and then sending that somewhere, and they're selling it. They have to be selling it.
It's very lucrative. I don't.
Yeah.
It's everywhere though, Joe. It's just it's in everything you see. It's in every. Look at the iPhone earbuds. They take your pulse rate, your heart rate.
Yeah.
Literally your breathing. Um, and not only that, but just the general volume that you listen to it, which might be your hearing level. All that, send that back. What is it? Who is it? Who bought Fitbit? Who was losing money? Hand over glove. Microsoft.
Was
I
it
want to say
Google?
Google. Yeah,
Maybe.
Google. You're right. Google bought Fitbit. It's a losing business. What did they buy? They bought Fitbit because Fitbit takes your heart pressure, your blood pressure, it's medical data. Everybody who uses it, the Peloton bicycles, all that, they're just user reporting, profiling vehicles that send that data back. You're right to look at the egress. What's the egress in your house from your refrigerator, for crying out loud, much less your nanny cam. But hey, why does it keep going up? Why doesn't somebody say enough? Why can you be a vendor and make a product that is essentially spyware and sell that legally? And this is where I say, is the answer legislation? At this point, I don't see what else is going to do, because when there's money to be made, and that's still, here's the problem with NetEnt or whoever they are. They're taking that data, pulling it, vacuuming it out of your house, putting it on and not spending any money, and then threat actors come in, take that, and that's the kind of stuff that your friends are talking about. Oh, pedophiles can get on the same. Yeah, because they're selling these in databases, and all of this data, because it can be monetized, has value to somebody. And it is just the craziest one I saw. I was on the dark web and I saw a database of 5 million users, and the data was all about what hair conditioner they used. And I thought to myself, A, why would you steal this if you were a hacker? And B, who would you sell it to? And it had been sold over 200 times in the last year, per record. And you think, wow,
Wow.
if you don't get that data equals cash, I don't care if it's here's a database of who uses what hair conditioner. Now you think, who's the buyer to that? Is it other people who are selling hair conditioner who want to figure out who uses what? Maybe. So it's competitor. Is it? I don't know. But it's just amazing how you can monetize the strangest data and make some cash off it. And our threat actors, I don't see any difference between a hacker and Mark Zuckerberg, none whatsoever. Just different methodologies. Mark will take it from you, for landing on a site. Amazon puts a cookie that will take your password. Go back and go to Experian or Equifax and pull your credit report for just landing on the site. Just landing on the site, and they will suck up all your passwords. What you build? Are you download Spotify? Are you using this? What applications? What operating system? What hardware? All for landing on the site. How does he get away with that? How can anybody get away with that?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, that's spyware. That's an intrusion by privacy. My grandmother wants to go to Amazon one day, and she goes to that big thing called the internet, and she types in Amazon and lands on his site. And suddenly, my grandma's got her credit rating in Jeff Bezos's database, and he doesn't protect it. And somebody steals my grandma's credit profile and sets up and does identity theft because Jeff Bezos didn't protect it, and my poor grandma landed on the site. And that's the way. We don't connect those dots. When I say we don't connect this is not ones and zeros. Think of that person who sat at that at that meeting and said, hey, if we get caught in this sex traffic thing, but then they went home to their husband or their wife and their kids, and that's what they did. They sat at that meeting where they said, hey, we had Facebook at Meta that day and said, let's go with this until we get caught. And then we'll just buy our way out. Or somebody, when we go to work in these tech companies, we just see this as ones and zeros. We don't understand about, hey, wait a minute, this is people's lives. We put people in harm's way from sex traffickers or pedophiles or whatever the issue is if we don't look after this data for children, data for housewives. All of this data in the wrong hands is critical to our well-being. Now we have not passed a law mandating the same protections required for top secret information, for a government. How come we're not doing that? Eyes only. I want my DNA treated as information, top secret. Eyes only. Five people in the world should see my DNA, and I should approve all five of them. And one is my doctor. Outside of my doctor, nobody else has got a right to see my DNA. And that's because I'm undergoing some sort of prognosis for some disease that I may or may not have. But that's a need to know. I just don't understand how we don't apply that same government secrecy classification scheme very easily to what is personal, sensitive data sets of you and me.
Yeah.
Do I sound cynical, Joe? Because part of it is the cappuccinos, and part of it is a lack of cappuccinos. So I can never sound too optimistic.
Well, this is why I have the podcast, right? This is a security professionals conversation about, topics that touch everyone, right? Like when we're working at these companies, as a security professional, you're not thinking about one subsect of your customer base or one subsect of the data. You're not. You're thinking about every single customer, every single location that they reside in, every policy, every law that's going into effect, every law that isn't even on the books that's being talked about, right? You're thinking about those things. And so if me and you, met up at a pub, right, somewhere in Europe, like this is what our conversation would be, right? So that's the whole reason why this platform exists. And I wanted to ask you, being an American and going to Europe, and then being in the risk industry, right? The risk side of cybersecurity. Was there a difference in mindset that you had to make to more effectively run your business, right? You talked about the selling perspective of how people are so polite that they won't tell you no. But we're also talking about fundamental ways in which entire continents view the risk of someone's data, right? So I'm wondering if there's a shift that happened somewhere in there where you said, yes, was it like ancestry.com shouldn't have my data, right? That's a mental switch though. Most people don't think like that, but you and I, of course, think like that. But how did you make that switch?
I don't think I've ever made the switch. I think my comments on how Europeans view personal data, and as seen through things like GDPR and the adoption of GDPR and how quickly it went to market and how quickly European firms were able to be compliant. Literally wasn't a big deal. Wasn't a big deal. Why? Because it was always there. It just was codified into legislation. And now to do business with a European firm, you had to be GDPR compliant to these principles, to this, And so Americans, like we talked about, had a harder time. So I have cultural, I feel that client is more this thing that we've been talking about. This is, it's not ones and zeros. It's data about people's lives. European clients are much more sensitive to that fact. That's not to say if there's money to be made, they won't sell a database. They do. I mean, the Americans are the ultimate example of the commoditization of our personal data at little or no regard to the data subject, I think. No, the changes I had to make essentially to doing business with Europeans was, Americans are very, we got to have it now. We got to have it, it is, have to have it yesterday. I need it cheaper. I need it faster. I need it brighter. I'd be that smart. Okay. But Europeans are very, very slow. So the sales cycle, for instance, I don't know what a sales cycle is for a penetration test in the States, but technically we could talk to a client for almost a year before they get it. And they haven't talked to anybody else, and they're not shopping around. They're considering it. And it's an expenditure. But the other thing I find is they actually calculate the return on the investment. And I have more, I quantify, all right, what benefits will come back from the pen test, and that return on my investment of 20,000 pounds or euros for a pen test. Well, you can buy a car for $20,000, not a great one, but it's a big purchase. And they're getting a pen test report of 10 pages, 15 pages, so So there's a lot more fixation on the value and the return on the investment for the spend, which I love. I just love. I don't think American CISOs in general use KPIs to measure the return on their cybersecurity spend. I don't. So I think that's very pragmatic, and I think that's great. And there is emotional response, but in terms of this is data about people's lives, I get that. But it's on the management level, but not necessarily in the board level. For instance, I walk into a board and I say, right, first of all, raise your hands if you have personal data in these systems, and you don't see a hand go up. In fact, it's fun. You say, wait a minute. None of the board members have their personal data, their first name, last name, home address, where their children go to school in the systems that have to be GDPR compliant or whatever, a compliance requirement, or I'm about to help them with their risk appetite for that. And that's the first thing I notice is, that's a business thing. That's not about me, and that I've got skin in the game, is not there. And I'm just shocked. And they look at me like, what, are you trying to be funny? I wouldn't put my wife's, our mortgage or where my wife's or where do my children go to school in these business systems? And you think, well, you don't get it. And I still think that this idea that it's not personal. I don't know about you, Joe, but I go to security events. Oh, God, I go to about 50 a year, 30 to 50 a year. Seriously, 1 or 2 a month. And I go and listen to people talk about it. But very few of us walk the walk. Very few people come, and they say the security in that system over there. And I say, well, what's on your laptop? Let's start there. And they go, oh, what's on my laptop has nothing to do with my, our threshold. We always project cybersecurity onto another system, but we seldom actually practice that. And what I see lacking in cybersecurity professionals, regardless of if they're European or if they're Americans, is that personal connection of this is my data that we've been talking about. One more quick, every 3 or 4 months so I'm out here in London, I have lunch with who is the MD of what is the UK's largest seller of firewalls. And I'm not big on cybersecurity products, as you can tell, but hey, it's part of the industry and I keep in touch. And I like this guy. We meet up for lunch every 3-4 months, once a quarter, whatnot. And anyway, but the last time I met him, literally earlier in the spring, he walks in and he's red, he's mad, he's upset. I said, what's wrong? And he said, somebody hacked into my laptop. And I went, the irony of somebody that makes a very good living selling cybersecurity products, somebody broke into your laptop, I said, I'm just having a great. I said, well, what's wrong? So what? I mean, it happens, it's risk management. But now he's upset because he said, yeah, and they took pictures of my wife and kids on our vacation. So now he's got this visual, somebody looking at pictures of his wife and kids on a beach someplace in Ibiza or whatever. And now it's personal. And this is a guy in our industry who sells firewalls for a freaking living and makes a very comfortable living at it. But now he's upset. Why? Because it's personal. Because, it's his wife, his kids. And I think that's our problem. That's our problem in the industry, that we don't have, we talk a lot of stuff, but until it's our data, until it's our hair conditioner, my hair conditioner, I'd be upset if somebody knew what conditioner I use. That's not a big secret. I just say, Anyway, it's that disconnect that I find, Joe, is we're guilty of.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, unfortunately, we're at the top of our time here. But I've really enjoyed our conversation, and
Same here, Joe.
Really want to have you back on.
That's kind. Thanks. I'd love to be back. Sorry to get too talky, but like I said, I'm an old man and cranky. Things could be better in our industry. And anyway, well done on the podcast and keep pushing that boulder uphill. But Joe, I appreciate our time. I appreciate our chat, and let's keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, before I let you go, how about you tell my audience where they could find you if they wanted to connect and where they could find your company if they wanted to learn more?
That's great. I'm on LinkedIn like everybody else. I'm on LinkedIn at just look for Richard Hollis, Hollis. The companies I work for is Risk Crew. It's riskcrew.com. And again, just no products, all services, but certainly see the philosophy in the company pages in terms of process over product and skin in the game. These things that we've been talking about. We we do try to practice what we preach, and the company's a reflection of that. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, by all means, reach out, connect if you got a problem with something I said, or a good joke, or a new hair conditioner I could use. I appreciate all three.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode.